Hello.
Hi everyone.
Hello, everyone. A couple of minutes after one, as expected. This is the second webinar of the CreaSus project. Good afternoon and welcome, all of you. I am George Charlis from Mosaic Culture and Creativity from Greece. And I have the pleasure to have with me my colleague Alison from Westpick from Ireland. Whether you were with us last week or for the first webinar or it is your first time here, welcome and thank you very much for being with us. If this is the first session of the first session that you participate, we will give a brief recap to understand where we left off in the previous week. So everything will be clear today. As a reminder, there will be no interruptions during the presentations. We will have a full Q&A session at the end. So either keep your questions ready or you can drop them on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen at any time. The basis, sorry, in the previous webinar, we had our project coordinator with us, Roberto Bernard from Banco Santander, but unfortunately today he could not be with us. He had to attend a meeting, so I will give a brief recap for the website, for the CreaSus project. Let me share my screen. So now I think you will be able to see the
Yeah,
presentation.
perfect.
All right. So what CreaSus project is about and why you are watching this webinar now. The main goal of the CreaSus project is the starting point, let's say, is the belief that creativity and sustainability are very much interconnected. The creative and cultural industries, the CCIs, as you might have heard them so far, are a big part of Europe's economy. We're not getting into numbers and percentages right now. You've heard them before. They also become increasingly important for everyday life, for making cities more resilient, more sustainable. They strengthen democracy, promote collaboration, improve societies, etc. So the narrative and the rationale of CreaSus project is to translate that potential into practical tools and strategies that the cultural and creative organizations of all sizes and individuals can actually use in their practice. The project is developing 4 key outputs, which are all integrated as part of the CreaSus platform. CreaSus platform.eu is a separate dedicated website of the CreaSus project that you can use for the CreaSus deliverables. There are 4 key outputs. The sustainability assessment model, which is a set of indicators that help you to evaluate your own sustainability level. The second tool that you can find in the CreaSus platform is the actions for sustainable transformation. It starts from where the assessment model stops. There are practical examples that are tailored exactly to the assessment results of your organization, and they will provide you with real, specific, tailored examples and solutions to your needs. So you don't have to start from the scratch. You can use or adjust successful good practices from around Europe in your organization. The third tool is the funding toolkit, which is the subject of the first two webinars of the CreaSus capacity building program. This is the second one. And the fourth deliverable is a series of sustainable business models that are specifically tailored to culture and creative organization. And this will be the subject of the third webinar, same day, same time next week. The organizations, the partners behind the CreaSus project are the foundation of the Santander Bank in Spain, Fundación Banco Santander, as a little partner. Mosaic Culture and Creativity from Greece, University of Bari from Italy, the European Network of Cultural Management and Policy, the NCAT from Belgium, Zabala Innovation from Spain, and last but not least, the West Beak from Ireland that will host the webinar next week. Let me take a moment and summarize where we left off in the previous webinar, because today's session is based on the theoretical part of the previous session. In webinar one, we explored the sustainability funding toolkit, one of the tools developing the CreaSus project, on the theoretical part of it. The goal was to give you a strategic overview and understanding of the funding landscape, to help you assess your organization readiness, and to help you draft and find the best funding strategy using the toolkits that you can find in the funding toolkit. The funding toolkit, allow me to remind you that it is available in the in the CreaSus website. We ended our previous webinar with three key messages. First of all, sustainability is an advantage during your funding efforts. Funders across Europe, either they are public organizations or private companies, are increasingly looking for projects that combine and contribute to environmental responsibility, to social inclusion, and good governance, the one that we say and we define as ESG sustainability. Second, readiness comes before applications. Before you start searching for funding, you need to look inside your organization, assessing your legal structure, your financial capacity, and your ability to present a clear project is the key that makes everything easier. The third, let's say, message that we discussed is in the previous webinar is that funding is a strategy and not just a transaction. You should build a specific and large diversified funding mix, as we say, to find multiple funding sources for your projects and not to be held only in one funding source, to plan ahead and to be prepared at any time for future opportunities, and to set realistic goals. So this is important, why you should assess your organization and yourself in order to focus on goals and funding opportunities that you are able to succeed and to implement. This is what we will deal with today. We have five specific sections. The first one is the EU level funding. We will discuss about programs like Creative Europe, Horizon Europe, Life program, Erasmus, etc. The second section we will discuss about national and regional funding, how they work, how to find them, and how to approach them. The third section will be about private and what we say alternative funding, sponsorships, foundation funding, crowdfunding, impact investments, etc. The fourth and quite important section will be how to apply. What does a strong proposal mean? How to plan your budget and how to check your eligibility, not prior to the application, but also during the implementation, and we will discuss about cash flows and funding the project and the implementation, and we will close with measuring and communicating our project and our proposal's impact. Let's start with EU level funding. Apologies. EU level funding is the category that tends to attract the most interest of the cultural and creative organization. It offers the largest budgets. It offers high visibility for you and your project, and also has strong alignment with sustainability priorities. But at the same time, EU funding is the most complex and the most competitive of the funding opportunities that you could focus on. So let's see it carefully, program by program. In practice, what we have in the EU level funding is what you know as EU programs that funds partnerships, teams of partners, to run projects across Europe, like Creative Europe, Erasmus, Horizon. The EU level funding is built around European policies. These are not simply grants and funding that exist for just supporting culture. They are instruments designed to address specific goals, and most of the times global challenges like climate action, social inclusion, innovation, engagement, democratic engagements, etc. So every EU program, this is what you need to keep, has its own logic. It exists because the European Union has identified a specific gap, a specific policy priority. So your job is to not to force your project into that logic, but to use the goal and the priorities that each European project has, and to connect it with the work that you already do. The most directly relevant program for cultural and creative organizations is the Creative Europe. Most of you might have heard it, or if you try to look for funding for creative organizations, this is the first that will come to your research. Creative Europe has two main strands. The culture strand that supports cross-border cooperations for cultural projects, music, architecture, heritage, arts, and the media strand that focuses specifically on the audiovisual sector, film, television, games, media, digital media, etc. It funds cross-border cooperation between cultural organizations from different countries. They look for, let's say, innovation in audience development, cultural participation, capacity building, etc. Who are eligible to participate in the Creative Europe program? It is usually addressed in registered cultural and creative organizations from EU member states and from countries that are associated and connected to the program. And depending on the category, on the strand of the call, you usually need at least two other partners from other European countries for most of the cooperation schemes. And for larger projects, you might need to build a consortium of four or even more partners from different countries. The funding rate, the amount of money, the percentage of your project budget that the Creative Europe funds usually varies depending on the category, and it usually, most of the times, actually, you need to have your own sources and to fund with your own sources at least 10 to 20%. And there are times that, depending if it is, let's say, in the media strand and it is a commercialized project, you may need to provide own funding for 50 or even more percentage. For example, if you are receiving funding to make a European film that will be distributed afterwards in Europe, or to develop a TV show that will be on streaming platforms or whatever, because it is commercialized afterwards, you will need to contribute with more percentage of the budget. Creative Europe is increasingly prioritizing environmental sustainability and social inclusion and civic engagement in every year call. Initiatives like the new European Bauhaus, which connects sustainability with community and aesthetics, or European Green Deal, for example, are closely aligned with Creative Europe objectives, and they are always a priority to the calls that the Creative Europe publish, and you have to address your project ideas to these priorities. Practically, what you can do to be engaged in a Creative Europe project is that you should connect or follow the Creative Europe website, obviously, but also the National Creative Europe desk. Each country has a specific service or an office that is called Creative Europe Desk, and it is usually can be found within the Ministries of Culture. The deadlines are always published on behalf well in advance, and you can know months before when the deadline is. Actually, we are right now where we are in the middle of the 2026 culture call, which has a deadline for beginning of May. Another major EU program is the Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe is the European Union's research and innovation program, with a total budget of more than 95 billion euros for the period 2021 to 2027. When you first hear about Horizon Europe, it might not seem like the obvious place that the cultural and creative organization would look for funding, but there is an entire category within the Horizon Europe that is specifically addressed to cultural and creative organization. It is called Cluster 2, and it is the category of the Horizon Europe program that funds ideas and projects related to culture, to creativity, to democracy, and to societal challenges. Usually, Horizon Europe support projects that are quite innovative, and in practice, for example, they can produce sustainable materials or green technologies or digital transformation, let's say projects that pilot ideas, methodologies, or new technologies just before they enter the real world. Usually, you can participate in a Horizon Europe program if you have a legal personality, if you are a structured company or an organization, but also as an individual, you can participate if you have if you are a researcher. It is most suited to organizations that can work within a research and development logic and to want to demonstrate innovative ideas. Horizon Europe requires multiple partnerships involving research, universities, business centers, civil society organizations from across Europe. And many times you might need to be part of a consortium of 15 or more organizations. Another program that in the beginning is not quite relevant, but actually you may find many opportunities is the LIFE program. It is the European Union's dedicated fund for environmental and climate change activities and funding. Cultural and creative organizations has are quite relevant if they want to present ideas that has important and clear environmental focus. For example, you can propose to implement exhibitions and festivals that want to adapt zero waste production, or initiatives for communities that want to integrate, let's say, environmental education. Or if your organization, probably you are a museum or something, or a gallery that wants to transform your own operations, focusing on sustainability. An important thing in life projects is that you should demonstrate replicability, which means that the project that you will present and eventually fund should be able to be scaled and to be adjusted in many cases, and not in the environment that you presented, not for your own case. They are managed directly from the European Commission, and you can find information about the LIFE program from the EU funding and tender portal. The most accessible program for creative organization is the Erasmus Plus. Probably it is the one that most of the cultural and creative organizations are involved to. Although, sorry, although Erasmus Plus is primarily a program that is for education and training, it has a broader scope. So cultural and creative organizations that are relevant and want to, let's say, do some staff mobility, participate in knowledge partnerships, develop educational projects, etc., can use to fund their own activities. an interesting thing about Erasmus is that it is managed in national level through national agencies, as we call it, in each country. And that means that you are able to be in contact with a funder in a local level in your own language. You can even apply and write your application in your national language, which is not advisable, but you can do it if you want to. You have this opportunity as well. Another category, which imagine it like standing with one leg in the EU funding level, funding, and in the national funding, is the two structural funds, the European Regional Development Fund and the European Social Fund, the ERDF and the ESF. These are the two largest funding instruments of the European Union. These funding opportunities are not applied directly in the EU level. They are deciding in the European level, but they are implemented nationally through specific managing authorities in each country. This opportunity is what you might have heard in your country as NSRFs, National Strategic Reference Frameworks, or any local name that it might have to your country. The interesting thing about these funding tools is that you can use them for purposes like infrastructure, equipment, or large hard activities. Most of the EU funding level opportunities and schemes use what we say soft activities. For example, you cannot build a municipal theater or a regional museum with Erasmus or Creative Europe. You need the structural funds to build it on a local level. So the practical approach here is to connect with your regional and national contact points and be able to find opportunities from these structural funds on your local level. Before we move on, let me take a moment and discuss about 4 principles that you need to follow if you want to be successful in your applications for EU funding. The first thing is to think European. Your project must have a clear cross-border dimension and to demonstrate what we say European added value. No European funding instrument will fund a project that is has only a local interest to your community or your own city. The second is to align your focus and your project idea with the specific EU priorities that each European program has. The third one is that you need to build strong partnerships. We are not trying to have a partnership with 5 same organizations with us. We need to have quality. We need to have complementarity of expertise. So for a project, you don't need for museums, but you might need a museum, a community organization, a research center, and a training center, depending on the activities that you want to implement. And also, you need partners from all Europe, across Europe, and the most geographic spread that you can demonstrate, the better is for your program. And the fourth one is to demonstrate innovation. Unfortunately, The European funding schemes run for many, many decades, so they have fund almost everything. So we are in 2026 and we need to think innovative, and we do not look in the European funding ecosystem if we want to fund another local festival or another small training program for the schools of our city. We need to be innovative, we need to push boundaries, we need to think outside the box and to try to separate our idea from the 100 ideas that an evaluator might have to consider. As we said in the first webinar, national and regional funding is often the most accessible and practical is the starting point for cultural and creative organization. This is especially useful for those that are starting right now and they do not have the administrative capacity or the background or the CV that they already have implemented some projects. We can see four different categories of national and regional funding. The first is national cultural funds and arts councils. Most of the countries have dedicated national bodies that distribute public funds to the cultural sector. Usually they are within the Ministry of Culture or they have an arts council. These bodies offer grants for artistic creation, for cultural productions, for audience development, or for the protection of cultural heritage. And they increasingly put sustainability priorities in their goals. The second category that you might look for regional funding and national funding are the ministries with relevant portfolios. Not necessarily ministries of culture, but also you can look at the ministries of environment, of education, of ministries of social affairs, or even financial economic development ministries. Imagine a project that wants to connect culture with sustainability and environmental protection or waste management in large events. So this is a project that it might be funded by the Ministry of Environment. Or imagine a project that you want to run a training program for specific categories of citizens. So it might be a project that might be funding by the Ministry of Education. So do not limit your focus only in the Ministries of Culture. The third category are regional and local authorities. Municipalities, regional governments, development agencies usually have their own culture and creative economy budgets. And what they are looking for are for small projects that affect local communities and their geographical jurisdiction. So you could look there for small local projects. And fourth, as we already mentioned before, the structural funds, we will not repeat it now. Let's close this section with a concept that the toolkit describes quite well. It is the fact that you need to think your strategy as a ladder. So you start from the bottom stairs where you can find local grants and municipal funding, etc., for small projects. And then since you've built your your knowledge and your administrative capacity, then you move to national scale programs and projects. And then every step makes you even a more important player for larger programs on EU level. Beyond the public funding landscape, the funds that comes from public organizations, the EU in EU level, in national level, and in regional level, there is growing an increasingly important ecosystem of private and alternative funding mechanisms. Sorry. This includes corporate sponsorship, foundations and philanthropic grants, crowdfunding, impact investment, etc. Let's start with the corporate sponsorship and CSR. Corporate sponsorship is not a donation to your organization. This has to be clear. It's a commercial relationship in which a company, a profit-making company, provides financial support, either in cash or in kind, to you in exchange of something of value, like visibility, branding, access to your audience, or the opportunity to demonstrate the theory, the commitment they have to the corporate social responsibility. This is a key to understand. It is important, if you want to access this kind of funding, to align to align the values of the company to your project mission. How you approach corporate sponsors. You can start by researching about their social responsibility report, sustainability commitments, their missions that are available in the website. Identify specific areas where their priorities can be connected to what you do, and you develop a proposal that actually tells them something. Show to them that they will have value by funding you. The second category is foundation. It is different, foundation and philanthropic grants. It is different from corporate sponsorship, because the foundations are not looking for marketing value or visibility. They are looking for projects that are aligned with their mission. So they want to support projects that contribute directly to the social, cultural, environment, or educational goals that the foundation already has and wants to achieve. So the first step in approaching a foundation is to understand what their mission is and how their mission can be connected to your project idea and to your organization as well, because they are not funding only projects. They do not want to show that we funded this project, but we supported this organization. The first step is to research the history of their grants in the previous year. So to understand what kind of projects they are funding. Then in your application, you need to show that you are focused on the mission that they have. And unlike the European projects, here you have a flexibility. So you might propose something, but discussing it with the funding organization, you might adjust it and make it closer to the foundation's mission as a part of the procedure. Crowdfunding is not actually a financing tool. It can be seen as an audience development, all right, as a community building. The principle here is simple. Instead of trying to secure one large grant from one funder, you are trying to raise small amount of money, small contributions from a large number of individuals that believe in your project idea. There are specific platforms to do that. Kickstarters, for example, or Indiegogo are the most well-known. The interesting thing here is that once you run a successful crowdfunding campaign, this will make your further steps, your next steps, much more easier. So if you go to a foundation or a corporate company or a national body and tell them that I have already 2,000 individuals that believe in my project and they have contributed through a crowdfunding campaign, that instantly make your proposal more interesting for them, and this can help you succeed better. Another private source for funding is impact investment. These are investors that they provide funding to organizations and they want to demonstrate specific social and environmental benefits. You have to have a clear, measurable social and environmental impact. The funders of this category needs to be able to track the change of their funding. The second one is the operational viability of the project. So, and yourself as well. So you need to be able to demonstrate that their investment will be well implemented and you have the capacity to do so. Let's move a little bit more faster in the next categories. Angels investors are individuals interested in their own, investing their own capital in early stage ideas, either it is a project or an enterprise. And they usually motivated by the financial return. They fund you in order to get something more back. The accelerators or incubators are programs that usually run by universities, banks, technology hubs, or foundations, and they provide in-kind opportunities like mentoring, training, and networking. Sometimes, not always, they can provide seed funding, which is a specific kind of funding for the first years of a new company. Also, you can have a look at innovation contests and competitions. It is easier to be involved in that kind of investment processes. Many banks and foundations as well are running these kind of competitions, and they provide the same like accelerators and incubators, funding in kind or some small prizes amount as prizes. So since we have covered the full landscape, let's say, of the funding sources, EU programs, national and regional schemes, now the questions that comes naturally is how you actually turn your idea or your interest in a successful application. In the funding toolkit that we have developed in the CreaSus project, there are 12 specific elements that every procedure should include. Either you will find them in a specific application form, or even if you have a blank page to describe your idea, these 12 elements should be definitely be addressed by your application, by your proposal. Let's go quickly in each one of them. The first element is the project title and a summary. It is the first impression. A summary of what you want to do is something that you should start with. The second is the context and the rationale. What exactly is the challenge that you want to address? Every project, every proposal that you will do must be connected to a specific need. We've said that in the previous webinar. You should address a specific challenge. Why does that challenge and the solutions that you have is important for the community or for the sector that you work with should be clearly demonstrated here. The third element are the objectives and the expected results. You should list what we say the smart objectives. The objectives and the results that you will have in the project must be specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant to the application, to the funding call, or to your idea. The fourth is the activities and the methodologies. You have to detailedly describe the activities that we'll do one by one, the logic between each activity, how the results of one work package, let's say, move and feed the next one, and also should be realistic and specific. The fifth element that you need to address is the target group and the beneficiaries. Who will be benefit from your project idea? You have to be precise and you need to show to the evaluator that you know and you have access to these target groups and the beneficiaries. The sixth, as we said, is innovation, and in this case, sustainability dimension. You need to think outside of the box, as we said before. You need to have something that it is quite impressive and not something that the evaluator or the program funders must have heard 1,000 times before. The seventh is the expected results of your project, the deliverables. What will be on the table by the end of the project? The eighth is the budget summary that we will deal with that in a moment. We're not discussing this right now. And the ninth is the team and the partners. Either it is a single organization project, is something that you will deal with and you will implement, so you should present your team, or is something that you will implement together with other partners, so you need to demonstrate and to show their expertise and the team that will contribute to the project. The 10th is the evaluation and impact assessment. You will need to have the ability to measure the success, define what success means for the project and how you will measure it. We will see it again further in the next section. And the 11th is communication and dissemination. First of all, no one will give you the money you need if you do not communicate the project and disseminate its results. So you need to have a specific communication strategy, a specific communication plan on how you will make the project results visible to not only for your target group and your beneficiary, but the general audience. And finally, the sustainability beyond the project. This is very important. What we used to know in the previous decades was that European Union ministries, local authorities were funding projects, and when the project ended, the result was in a box or in a folder, in a library or in a cell or in a closet. So you need to present them that you will be able to or you will create the environment so the project will continue working and producing results after the funding period. When you plan your budget, you should have in mind definitely these 5 categories. So the first one are fees and budget for personnel, artists, designers, project managers, etc. If needed, you should have a dedicated amount of budget for travel and mobility. It may include transport, accommodation, or costs relevant to this category. Materials and equipment that are useful for you to implement the project. Subcontracting and external services, which needs to be addressed very carefully, because in this category, you should explain how you will use this budget to bring expertise that you don't have in the team. So that means that if you want a significantly large amount for subcontracting external expert, that rings a bell to the funder and the evaluator that you do not have the capacity on your own and you need external experts. So that's not really good for your organization and for your evaluation, and also communication and dissemination costs, which are very important. Here you should try to demonstrate that you will co-fund the project or the initiative by yourself if it is possible. So it is good for the evaluators to see that this is not something that you will do only if you get the funding, but you have the ability to fund it yourself and you need just something to support that. And we've discussed it in the previous webinar as well. Never double fund. So you should never use multiple funding sources for the same project. In most of the cases, this is prohibited, but if not, this is not a good sign for your evaluator. So this is an eligibility check. You will find the checklist in the funding toolkit. So I want to discuss 3 practical challenges. First of all, co-funding it tends to be a prerequisite in all cases. Most of the programs will not cover 100% of your project cost. So you need to be able to contribute with a percentage of the budget you present. The second challenge is the cash flow. Many funding programs are working on reimbursement basis, which means that you will need to pay with your own money in the first phase of the project, and when the first report comes, then you will provide the documentation, so you will get this money back. So you need to be in position to cover a part of the project in the beginning with your own resources. And the third one is that you need to report every single euro that will be spent, and you should be able to do that. You have a specific dedicated team with project managers or someone to be dedicated in that reporting procedure. Finally, let's go to how to measure our impact. In the funding toolkit, we introduced 4 levels that four elements that needs to be addressed when we present a project in a funding program. The first level is input, the resources that you will invest. For example, you will put 5,000 euros on sustainable materials or 3 months of staff time. Inputs shows to the evaluator what you will put in the project, but they do not tell what the achievement will be. The second level is output, what you will produce. We will implement 5 workshops, or 200 participants will be reached in an event. These again are countable and concrete, and they are important, but they do not tell what will be changed. The third is the outcome. It's the short-term change. A community group, for example, might start a new cultural program, or an organization might have changed the management policy to reduce waste. Outcomes is where we start to have the change. So the fourth level is the impact, the thing that funders want to see, the long-term difference that your project and your idea will do. When you plan your project and you write in your proposal, you should think exactly every step of these 4 levels, and you need to focus very much on what is left after the project is implemented. So, closing today's webinar, let me encourage you to do 3 specific steps just to test your ability and your readiness. Try to identify one funding opportunity that fits to your position, to your situation right now. Not need to be the most prestigious or a large one. Once you spot a specific opportunity, you can use the 2 tools of the funding toolkit, the funding decision matrix and the funding flowchart, and see if it works for you to put some effort in that opportunity. This is the first step that the funding toolkits toolkit presents to you. Second, review your ability and your proposal capability. Imagine, for example, your last proposal you wrote and the evaluation you got, or a proposal that you wrote but you did not manage to apply. So you can use the checklist and the practical reference in the funding toolkit to test your ability to write a clear proposal. And third, start measuring your impact on behalf before you apply. Use the self-assessment tool of the CreaSus project to document and to present your baseline. Run the self-assessment tool and have a first idea of where your organization is right now, which is actually interesting to use it in your project narrative. So that was for today. I hope this was useful for you. And let's see if we have any questions from you, or you want to discuss something about the project or about the presentation that we had today.
Thanks very much, George, for the brilliant presentation. We have a few, not really questions, but observations, which are quite helpful. I know the participants can see it, but maybe it's useful just to highlight some of the comments. So Pani from the Hungarian Open Air Museum made a very relevant point around that the different types of funding, that in addition to the EU level, there are also world organizations such as UNESCO that provide support for special developments in the cultural field. So Penny also mentioned that the support is not as large at the EU level and it is really, really targeted, but it's still worthwhile taking these into account. So yeah, that's a very good point to make as well. And Eva also noted as well that Creative Europe allows the applications to be written in any of the EU national languages. So very important for those who English may not be their first language. She notes that as well. Other than that, George, it's just a good feedback you're receiving. So it must be all very clear. There's not many questions on that. But as always, guys, we're more than happy to follow up bilaterally if anybody has any questions by email.
Indeed, you can find the recordings. You will be able to find the recordings of the 3 webinars in a couple of weeks. When the third webinar also completed next week, we will upload the recordings of the 3 webinars in the project website, so you can come back if needed and run through them again. And also in the project's email, you can directly try to reach us and ask something specific about the CreaSus platform, about the capacity building projects program, about the funding toolkit, and the other deliverables of the project. All right, if no one has any question left, we can call it probably.
Brilliant, George. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll catch you all next week when we have the business models webinar, which will be taking place at the same time on Tuesday, the 28th. And that'll be hosted by ourselves here at Westwick. So please do come along. And until then, have a very nice week.
It was a pleasure having you here with us. So have a nice day. Have a nice rest of the week, and see you next Tuesday for the third and final webinar of the project. Thank you very much. Bye.